On everybody, welcome to our early game start sit preview for week 7. It's crazy that we're already here, man. Like, this season is flying by. Lots of intensity going on with injuries and COVID games. Fortunately, looks like maybe we'll sneak by. I know it's kind of been going under the radar. I guess we do have to kind of watch out for that Raiders game. They're currently sequestering the entire offensive line. I guess someone was in close contact. They're doing contact tracing right now. Going to be testing that, so keep an eye out for that. If there is going to be a game that could potentially get moved, it would be that one at this point. Obviously, anything can change over the next couple of days. Things have evolved rather quickly over the past couple of weeks. But hey, we survived a week where we were able to get everyone back on track. Now we've got the Steelers and Titans doing their makeup game this week. We saw the Patriots and Broncos do their makeup game last week. So I'm really hoping that this is a sign of good things to come. Hopefully, with the increased protection and provisions that the NFL has provided for the league, we won't run into any more COVID situations here going into the next couple weeks. Would love to actually see us get through a full season and not have to deal with any more insanity. We're already having to deal with enough as it is in terms of running back injuries, wide receiver injuries, just crazy injuries all over the place, and really hoping that it ends up, being a little bit easier from here. But we'll see. We'll keep you guys posted as best we can. Last week was a pretty good week for us. We missed on a couple of the games, but we're able to hit overall. I feel like our rankings were pretty accurate thus far. We've been hovering around the top 20 in terms of expert consensus on Fantasy Pros with our rankings. Obviously, we use our rankings to funnel into these start sits, tweak them based on the Vegas lines, and do the best we can to improve every week. Obviously, we're not going to ever be perfect. I'd love to be able to go in the future and tell you exactly how things are going to go, but that wouldn't be very fun now either, would it? Because then it would just be it would be too easy, right? Part of the thing that makes fantasy football fun is the fact that you have to make educated decisions based off of limited and sometimes no information. So obviously, another thing to point out today before we get into anything else, check your waiver wire if Antonio Brown is there. So probably be rostering him. Looks like the scuttlebutt is that he might actually be looking to sign with the team the moment that he gets off of his suspension. We don't know at this point. There still is some lingering issue with his lingering legal issues that he may not actually be able to play right away. He might end up getting more suspension time, but obviously worth the risk there. Antonio Brown, last time we saw him last year, was dominant again. So if he ends up going to the Seahawks, to the Ravens, to the 49ers, to the Packers, could be a really valuable fantasy asset. So definitely make sure you check your waivers. Go run there right now. If your league wasn't paying attention, you should try to pick him up real quick and just sneak him on the back of your bench if you have a spot for him. All right, without further ado, though, let's talk about players that are actually playing this week. And we begin, as we always do when there is a Thursday night game, talking the Thursday night game. A bit of a, I don't want to say a letdown. This could still be a good game. We've got the New York Giants and the Philadelphia Eagles battling in the worst division in the NFL right now. The New York Giants, have one win. The Eagles have one win and a tie. Both of these teams just trying to survive. But really the more interesting storyline in this game to follow is the fact that we've heard some, talk now that Doug Peterson is saying, we might need to get Jalen Hurts more involved. Well, that's a bit of a red flag because you don't just get a quarterback more involved. Maybe they use him as like a Taysom Hill type. I really hope that's not what their intention is. I think what that is signaling to me anyway is Carson Wentz needs to find a way to win, which is tough. I don't want to just say that Carson Wentz hasn't been bad because he's been bad. Let's face it, he's had some really poor performances, throwing the most interceptions of his career. He's had a lot of injury issues for his receiver core pretty much the entirety of his career. So it's not like we haven't seen this from him before. But again, already seeing everything devolve very quickly there in Philadelphia. If Carson Wentz loses this game, we might see a Jalen Hurts start pretty soon. So keep that in mind. If you're trying to ride Carson Wentz in a super flex league, Jalen Hurts is still out there on the waiver wire. You're going to need to keep an eye on that. Obviously, the Giants they just are who they are at this point, a beat-up team with terrible offensive line and a unknown as to whether Daniel Jones is ever going to be able to put it together and be a really proficient quarterback in the NFL. But from a fantasy angle, there's going to be better games on the slate. This is not one of the better games. Doesn't mean there aren't players that we want to play in this game, but there's definitely going to be better games. Obviously, Miles Sanders dealing with that 1 to 2 week injury. My guess is he's going to be out through the bye week since they do have a bye week in week 9. Going to be rolling with Boston Scott in this one. Whereas we know with the Giants, Barkley has been out for a while. So let's go through it. We'll break down the lines. And as usual, if you guys have questions, you guys are watching this live, go ahead and post them. I get to them between the different games, but we do chop these up and post them up for everybody else. Anyway, going back to the game, 45-point over-under, one of the lower point totals on the week. Eagles are actually favored to win this one by 4.5. Giants defense has actually been playing pretty admirably well. They're not really good at slowing down the run, allowing a decent amount of points to receivers, with the exception of the leading receiver. James Bradbury, when he shadows someone, has actually been one of the best shutdown corners in the league. Giants have been really good at slowing down quarterbacks and tight ends. Zach Ertz obviously out. Dallas Goedert not going to be playing. We're not playing any tight ends anyway. Whereas on the Eagles side, we see that the Eagles are actually average against quarterbacks and receivers. They've been giving up the 4th most points to tight ends. I know I said last week was Evan Ingram's last straw, but we're going to go back to the well one more time. It's hard with the tight ends. Tight ends have just been, just as bad as they've typically been. It's unfortunate. Every year we think we're going to get some consistency there. We get some breakout stars like Jonnu Smith has a bunch of good games, and then he has a terrible game, and then Mike Gesicki has a few good games, and then he gooses you. So it's just nonstop, up and down, outside of the big 4 guys on top. It's been really difficult to find consistency at tight end. So we're going to go back to the well with Evan Ingram one more time. So without further ado, let's talk about our starts and sits in this one. Looking at the Giants, as we mentioned, the Giants defense, Evan Ingram here, definitely going to be someone that we're going to be looking at one last time. Eagles, where you can beat them has been through the tight end spot. It's not the greatest play, not a must start by any means, but he's still top 12, so that still makes him in our tight end ones for the week, someone that we're going to be looking to start. Now, Darius Slayton, monitor the injury report. He's been limited in practice. Looks like he's going to be fine. He did come back into that game, but he did leave briefly with an ankle injury, so a little bit concerned about that. Now, Sterling Shepard, still technically on IR, but he is practicing. It looks like he could be back this week. I'm a little bit hesitant putting him into my starters just because they might ease him back in. But, based on bye weeks, injuries, you might be in a situation in a deeper league where you are basically deciding between a guy like Sterling Shepard or maybe a guy like Damiere Byrd or Scott Miller, some of these fringier, just splash types, Mecole Hardman. If that's the case, if you're able to sneak Sterling Shepard back into your roster this week, I'd be willing to start him over some of those guys. Check my rankings on FantasyAddictionNetwork.com. We update those pretty much daily throughout the week. So check it tomorrow, and you can measure against some of the other fringier options. So I have him in a start spot here, assuming he comes off of IR. Obviously, if he doesn't come off IR, we're not playing him. I think both defenses are viable in this one. Lower scoring game. Both of these teams are allowing a ton of sacks. Carson Wentz has been a turnover machine, as is Daniel Jones. Should be a really good game for the defenses for fantasy's sake. Daniel Jones, not someone we're excited about starting. Devonta Freeman. He's had a few decent games for fantasy. He's been like a low-end running back too. But as we mentioned, the Eagles are much tougher against the run as they are against the pass. I'm not very excited about Devonta Freeman this week. If you have to start him, I think he's right around RB30 for us this week. So again, check the ranks to see if I would start him or not. Or you can always ask a question. I'll respond to you as soon as I see it. But we're not starting Golden Tate regardless of Sterling Shepard comes back. He's looked washed. At this point, I'm not really looking towards anyone other than Slayton, Shepard, or Ingram. Okay, on the Eagles side, I was a little bit hesitant to start Boston Scott. Analyzing back to week 1, he did look decent until he got hurt. He missed a good bit of that game against Washington in week 1. Came in and didn't look great this last week against the Ravens, but the Ravens are a much better run defense than the Giants. I think Scott is going to have the majority of the role here. Should see between 60 to 70% of the snap share. Is a better receiver than Corey Clement, and where the Giants can be exposed and beaten is on the ground. If you paid up for Boston Scott, you probably needed him to start this week. And even if you didn't, I think he's definitely worthy as like a middling RB2 play here. And if he does perform well, you're going to be really happy because he gets to play the Cowboys next week, assuming Miles Sanders is out. So I like Boston Scott a lot. Now, Travis Fulgham, I have him in my top 36. So by nature, if he's a wide receiver 3, he's going to be a starter. But I am a little bit concerned if he does get the shadow treatment by James Bradberry. That could be you could be in for a rough night with Fulgham, but he did just perform well against a tough Steelers secondary and a tough Baltimore Ravens secondary. So at this point, he may be matchup proof. If you're in the spot where you picked him up and you needed to start him, you probably need to do so again this week. I still have confidence in him. Hopefully he's able to sneak in a touchdown. Even if it's a lower performance than what we've seen in the past couple weeks, I think he can still have a decent fantasy day. Carson Wentz, if you had to start him, he could have a decent game in this one. But as we mentioned, the Giants are actually been pretty stout against slowing down fantasy quarterbacks. So not that excited to start Carson Wentz in this one. Deshaun Jackson coming back off that injury, probably ease him back in. He didn't look all that great when he was healthy anyway. I don't really expect him to do too much. Watch him go off, but I'm not going to throw him out there unless I'm desperate. And then same thing, unless you're in a really, really dire strait, I'm not going to be throwing Richard Rodgers out there against the Giants, who've been pretty good at slowing down opposing tight ends. So, and then Greg Ward has pretty much been phased out of this offense. So with Deshaun coming back, and then likely to see Alshon Jeffrey and Jalen Reagor within the next week or so, I think Greg Ward is basically being relegated back to the bench. So not really looking to start him. I like the Eagles in this one. I have them winning 23-17. So a lower scoring game. Should be a couple of fantasy plays here. Nothing crazy. But we'll see if the Eagles can end up getting their second win on the year. This is my prediction. I will admit, though, up to this point, Thursday night games have kind of been my error. I have missed on the past couple of Thursday night games. Been really accurate on Sunday, but and Monday we've been perfect. But Thursday night we've been really bad. So bear that in mind. But I got the Eagles winning this one 23-17. All right, we got a couple questions over here. Okay. Start, flex, and bench A.J. Brown, Keelan Cole, and Tyler Lockett. Oof. Well, I think that one's actually easy. You're going to start whoever has the earlier game, which I think is A.J. Brown, and you always want to flex the guy with the later game because if for some reason Tyler Lockett, if he's playing in the afternoon game and you put him in your flex, let's say he gets hurt an hour before the game starts, at least you had the opportunity to pivot to a tight end or a running back as well. So that's just a tip in general. Always play your later games, push them up into your flex as much as you can. So even if you have Derrick Henry versus Boston Scott, well, obviously Derrick Henry is a better running back than Boston Scott. But since Boston Scott is playing on Thursday night, if you're playing him, put Derrick Henry into your flex and put Boston Scott into your running back slot because it doesn't make any sense to lock in your flex early on in the week. So that same logic follows. So that being said, I'm starting A.J. Brown and I'm flexing Tyler Lockett. I like Keelan Cole, don't get me wrong, but playing against the Chargers, not expecting as much of a workload for him this week. DJ Chark should be a little bit healthier as well. So we're going with Brown and Tyler Lockett. Pick 2 PPR from Blue Crew. We've got Claypool, Higgins, or Kupp. Really concerned about Kupp's matchup with that Bears secondary. I don't blame you, and I probably would go. I don't blame you at all. I think Claypool is a must start. Higgins has been really dominant playing against the Browns secondary. Browns have been, as we'll get to, have been a bit of a salve for wide receivers. I mean, yeah, I'd probably go Claypool and Higgins. Kupp could have a couple touchdowns. He needs to redeem himself after a poor outing on Sunday night, but I think I like Claypool and Higgins just a little bit better. Let's see. Nantho Hit says, I have Damian Harris and Jamal Williams. Should I drop one of these running backs for Gus Edwards? I guess that is probably more dependent on if you have Aaron Jones. I would probably drop Damian Harris and keep Jamal Williams. Whereas if you don't have Aaron Jones, you probably don't need Jamal Williams. So, but either of those guys I'd be willing to drop for Gus Edwards just on the chance that he ends up starting next week. I think they're not letting on to how severe that injury was with Mark Ingram. We saw something similar with the way that they handled Christian McCaffrey and Michael Thomas. If it's a high ankle sprain, there's no way he's going to be back in week 8. So yes, I would roster Gus Edwards now. Okay, who should I use as a wide receiver 2 and flex from these? We got Robert Woods, Juju Smith-Schuster, Fulgham, Tebow, and Mike Williams. So trying to think through my rankings here. I would probably go either Woods and Fulgham or Woods and Debo. Mike Williams is a bit more boom bust, and Juju, man, it's hard to really trust Juju at this point. He's just been so up and down, and it has been a massive disappointment. Could have a good week, but at this point, he's staying on my bench until I see some consistency there. Another league, should I drop Hooper for Gus Bus? No, well, I mean, if you have Waller, I mean, obviously he's already passed his bye week. So yeah, in that case, if you need help at running back, I could see that being a good idea. Let's see. Got Robbie Anderson, Justin Jackson, Fournette for Gaskin, White, Humphreys, and Deontay Johnson. That is interesting. My remaining RBs and wide receivers are Gurley, Drake, Edmonds, Robert Woods, DK, Edelman, and Chark. So I'm not sure which side you're getting. Are you getting the Robbie Anderson side, or are you getting the Deontay Johnson side? I am totally down for selling high on Robbie Anderson and Justin Jackson. I think Myles Gaskin is heavily underrated, and Deontay Johnson coming back off that injury, I could definitely see him being better than all of these guys down the stretch. He looked really good in the 2 games he was healthy and playing. It doesn't look like this injury is going to be something that lingers. I think people are taking too much weight into the fact that he missed a game due to concussion and got hit really early on in that game against the Eagles. So I like Deontay Johnson and Gaskin's side in that one, especially sneaking in James White. Assuming this is full PPR, I really like that. As I mentioned, I think DJ Moore is starting to creep up a little bit more, and will start taking away some of the touches from Robbie Anderson. Also got a pretty tough schedule coming up here. So, and then Justin Jackson appeared on the injury report today as well. Eckler will be back at some point, so I would definitely prefer the Gaskin, Deontay Johnson, and White side. Okay, we'll get back if there's any more questions. We'll get back there in a second. All right, looking over, and just we're talking in our questions about some of the Panthers receivers, but we got the Panthers and the Saints here. Good divisional matchup. Saints coming back off of their bye week. Finally are going to see Michael Thomas again. Literally have not seen him perform well for fantasy. Comes out, has a pretty poor performance in week 1. Deals with that high ankle sprain as the game was pretty much over. It was a really unfortunate circumstance. And then last week he was ready to play, but then he punched someone in practice, and Sean Payton suspended him for copping an attitude when he confronted him on it. Yada, yada, yada. You don't know the full story there, but clearly it was something that Sean Payton felt was deferential enough to the team that he needed to suspend his best player, and they almost lost the game against the Chargers, and I think it would have been a lot better if they would have had Michael Thomas. So we'll see. Him coming back from a high ankle sprain, I don't think we can expect him to be exactly what we were hoping for from the start of the season. Give him a few more weeks to ease back in. But that being said, if you've been holding on to Michael Thomas or you traded for him, like, you're dying for him to come back. So of course you're going to be starting him this week. So let's talk about this game. 51 point over under. Saints are heavily favored to win this. 7.5 points. Panthers defense has been honestly pretty good at slowing down quarterbacks, receivers, tight ends. We saw they finally slowed down Allen Robinson. He had a mediocre performance this last week. Quarterbacks have performed poorly against the Panthers. The only place to really beat them, and boy do you beat them, is in the run game, unless you're David Montgomery and just suck at football. The Panthers have been allowing a ton of fantasy points to running backs. So this is going to be a massive week for Alvin Kamara, and honestly probably even flex Latavius Murray in there as well. Saints defense has been a disappointment this year, giving up a lot of points to quarterbacks and tight ends. They've been absolutely exposed by tight ends. We saw Robert Tonyan have that explosive game against them. We saw Darren Waller just destroy them on Monday night there in week 2. So overall, the Saints defense has not been as good as advertised. Their run game has been pretty good. Justin Jackson had a decent performance against them the last time we saw, but other than that, their run defense has been strong. And Marcus Lattimore has been, he's still been good, but, missed that game. Sorry, my mind is slipping now, but he missed a game previously, due to injury. We'll see if he's coming back fully healthy here. It was the game versus the Lions, sorry. And then, overall, the secondary has been a little bit banged up, so we'll see if that continues here. Basically, what I'm saying is I'm not as afraid of the Saints defense as we were heading into the season, leading me to be pretty confident in starting a lot of these Panthers. So Mike Davis, assuming he's healthy, we haven't really heard. So he left the game due to an ankle issue, came back into the game and then left again. Had a decent performance, had a touchdown to save his day. Didn't look like he was banged up too badly, but something to monitor. We'll see. I haven't really seen any of the practice reports yet. Nothing major, so it doesn't look like it's going to hold him out. If Mike Davis were to miss time, there really isn't a running back to pivot to here. But I think Mike Davis will be fine, and it should be a good start this week because of his work in the passing game, even though the Saints have had a good run defense, gets enough targets to make up for that, especially in PPR. At this point, you're pretty much starting Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore regardless of matchup, especially if Curtis Samuel is out. I have him down there on my bench. He was out last week. Not sure of his status at this point. Probably will find his way back into the lineup this week. But with him going out, we saw DJ Moore be a lot more involved in the target share. Now, DJ Moore has been disappointing as well in terms of just drops this year. I think he's tied for the league lead in drops, and that's been pretty disappointing because that has never really been part of his career. But look for that to hopefully continue to turn around, because had he been able to convert some of those, he would actually be outscoring Robbie Anderson right now. So as we kind of talked about earlier, I think DJ Moore is going to slowly take back over that wide receiver 1 role. But at this point, they're both high-end wide receiver 2s, guys you can start every week. Teddy Bridgewater, not someone I'm excited about starting this week. The Saints have been pretty good at slowing down quarterbacks, even though receivers have found a way to at least get enough done on them. And then Ian Thomas, he's been really bad. The Saints have been terrible against tight ends, so something's going to give here. Either Ian Thomas is going to have a good game, or the Saints defense is finally going to have a good performance against tight ends. If you're in a really tough spot, I could see myself starting Ian Thomas, but hopefully you're not in that bad of a spot. On the Saints side, Alvin Kamara could very easily be the number 1 player in fantasy football this week, going against the putrid Panthers defense. Michael Thomas, as we mentioned in the lead up here, coming back from that injury. At this point, you don't have the luxury to bench him. Hopefully he comes back and is 80-90% of his full strength and sees a pretty good performance here. And then Jared Cook, could have a decent game here as well. Finally able to hopefully recover from the injury that had been lingering for a while. Now, where we get to the other options here, Drew Brees is not someone I'm actually excited about starting. He's been underwhelming thus far. Taysom Hill stealing some goal line work there, getting that run in against the Chargers, limiting his upside. Kamara getting it done on the ground. Latavius Murray getting it done on the ground. Honestly, I have Latavius Murray here in my second guess, but the run defense here for the Panthers is so bad. If you're in a bad spot, I could see you starting both Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray and hoping for a touchdown for Murray, because this run defense is just kind of a joke. Now, Emmanuel Sanders was heavily targeted in that game against the Chargers, but I do think with Michael Thomas coming back, you're not going to be seeing that much more. If you're in a pinch, I could still see myself starting him, but I'm trying to avoid it and not going back to Traquan Smith now that he's playing the third fiddle there, arguably the fifth fiddle after Cook and Kamara, if you're counting those guys as well. So pretty easy here for who we're starting. Everyone else you could talk me into, but not someone I'm very excited about. So overall, I do agree that the Saints win this one. I think it'll be a little bit closer than Vegas is saying right now at 7.5. I have the Panthers covering that barely. Saints winning this one 28-21 at home. I do not want to talk about this game, but we do talk about every game. So, I'll hold my breath, hold my nose. Every single week that we have to talk about the Jets, it's a bit depressing. I can't believe we are making it to week 7 and Adam Gase still has his job, when we've seen, Bill O'Brien and Dan Quinn both lose their jobs, and then immediately their teams turn around and are performing well. Maybe they're just letting Adam Gase stick around so that way they can secure that 101 spot and get Trevor Lawrence. I guess that's all we can really hope for at this point, just observing from the outside in. But as long as Adam Gase continues to be in charge, we are not excited by really anything that the Jets are putting out. And then playing the Bills. Bills coming off of a 2-game loss streak here after losing to the Titans and to the Chiefs. They're definitely going to be hunting for blood, trying to get back into this and avoid the Dolphins taking over the lead in the East. So this should be a bloodbath for the Buffalo Bills. 45-point over-under, and the Bills are favored to win this one by 13, and arguably that might not be enough. The Bills haven't been that good on defense, which has actually been a little bit surprising. They have been better at slowing down the past couple weeks, or at least last week they really did slow down Tyreek Hill with Tre'Davious White coming back. That should help their receiver defense here. So I think this is a little bit skewed just based on some of the injuries. So I think their defense is a little better than advertised, whereas the Jets, they've been average, but other teams haven't really needed to put up a lot of points against them because they haven't done anything to stay in the game. So I think that's less of their defense being good and more of their offense just being terrible. So on the players we're starting this week, Josh Allen had a really good week against the Jets in week 1, looking for him to have another good game this week. Devin Singletary playing against the Jets' run defense is really bad. I know Devin Singletary has been disappointing the past couple weeks, but in winning games, we saw Devin Singletary in week 3 and 4 come out and have a pretty good performance. Look for him to bounce back this week. Stephon Diggs has been arguably the best value of the draft this year, and you're starting him every week until further notice. And the Bills defense are the number 1 defense to start in fantasy on the week. Now, John Brown, I hope they sit him. They need to sit him and just let him get healthy because he's been hobbled for the past couple weeks, and this team hasn't looked the same on offense with John Brown hobbled. Stephon Diggs definitely still getting it done, but without that secondary deep threat, they haven't been able to maneuver around opposing secondaries nearly as well. So if John Brown sits, I think you could definitely talk me into playing either Beasley or Davis here, but if John Brown plays, it's kind of getting really messy there with not knowing how healthy Brown is going to be. If we knew that Brown was going to be healthy, he would definitely be a starter. But if Brown isn't there, either Beasley or Davis is going to have a good game. Just kind of hard to predict what's one. At this point, I'm kind of just trying to lay low, let the situation kind of work itself out. But we'll play Diggs, of course. And then we'll see if Dawson Knox is back this week, but probably not going to be throwing either of those guys out there. They only really had one good week up to this point. And then the backup running backs, Zach Moss has been a massive disappointment up to this point. TJ Yeldon has actually outplayed Moss and arguably looked better than Singletary in some of his snaps. So keep an eye on that situation. If TJ Yeldon starts to see his snap share tick up, that might be someone that we want to throw on the back of our bench. But for this week, I'm just believing in Singletary, and we'll see what comes of that. On the Jets side, Jamison Crowder is the only guy you can really trust at this point. Every time he plays the Jets, and assuming Sam Darnold is back, the last couple times he's played the Bills, he's had double-digit target share, and we saw him go off against them in week 1. Was pretty much the only good thing for the Jets in week 1, and that's what we're expecting to happen here again, even at home. We're not starting any of the runners here. I know Brashad Perriman had a couple of targets last week, but again, this is a tougher defense with the Bills, so there's really no one else that we like here. Now, Denzel Mims should be someone that you have to keep your radar on in deeper leagues. We could see him come on over the back half of the season and actually perform well. A lot of the rookie wide receivers have been pretty dominant up to this point. We haven't seen Mims yet, but we know from his athletic profile that he came in as one of the most athletic wide receivers in this year's draft class. Second round pick. Should see him come on at some point in the season. They need offensive weapons badly. So Mims comes back likely this week. Stash him on your bench if you can. See what happens over the course of the next couple weeks. He could have a nice stretch of games down towards the end of the season. But yeah, we're not starting anyone else here. Bills should win this one pretty easily. I've got the Bills winning this one 31-13. All right, in another rematch game on the week, just talked about the Bills and Jets, but in this one, we've got the Browns and the Bengals reprising their week 2 battle here. This one in Cincinnati was a really exciting game, a really fun game the last time we saw them. Nick Chubb obviously went off, but Nick Chubb is not playing this week, so it should be a little bit interesting here. We've seen the Bengals offense kind of devolve and then reshape themselves last week against the Colts, so could be a much more exciting game than some people may think. Obviously, the Browns have had some offensive woes, but the Bengals defense has been a really good place to get your offense right. We saw even Phillip Rivers look like a competent quarterback against the Bengals defense, so I think this is going to be a good game for fantasy players. 50.5 over-under in this one. Browns favored to win this one on the road by 3, and giving them an applied point total of about 27-24. The Browns have been the worst and most exploitable in the receiver category, so that's good news for T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. They've been average everywhere else, whereas the Bengals have been decent against receivers, but again, I think that is a little bit skewed. We saw even last week, Marcus Johnson came out of nowhere and had a good game against them. And, just based on the teams that they played, last time these guys played, Odell Beckham went off against them. And I think that, we're not really nervous about any spot of this Bengals defense at this point. So in terms of who we're starting, this is pretty easy again. We're starting Kareem Hunt. He had a disappointing game last week, but it was a much tougher matchup. We should see the Browns get back to the way of football that they want to play, which is running the ball heavily, staying in, ahead in the game, and I think they can do that here against the Bengals. Odell Beckham obviously had a really good game against them in week 2. Look for him to have a bounce back game here. Austin Hooper has been on a much better tear in terms of his consistency from the tight end spot, and tight end consistency is very hard to find this year, so you're probably starting Austin Hooper if you have him. And then the Browns defense should remain a pretty good start here. We saw them pretty much terrorize Joe Burrow the entirety of the game last time they played with guys like Myles Garrett, so should be a fun game for the Browns defense. Now, you can start Baker Mayfield if you're in, if you are on a bye week with your quarterback, or if you are still looking for a replacement here. He's an okay stream. Had a decent game against the Bengals last time. Obviously, with Nick Chubb out, they're going to have to pass a little more than they did in week 2. It's kind of hard to go back to him, seeing how poorly he performed the last couple weeks, but very tough matchups. So we'll give him the benefit of the doubt and see what we can do here against the Bengals. Now, Jarvis Landry has been very inconsistent this year, and I'm trying to keep him out of my lineup if at all possible. Not playing Dearness Johnson, and yeah. So pretty easy on the Browns side. On the Bengals side, it's also easy, assuming Joe Mixon is playing. Now, I have the star next to Mixon and Giovanni Bernard. Obviously, we're recording this on Wednesday. As of Wednesday, Joe Mixon is not practicing. So that is a bit of a concern, but it is Wednesday. Wednesday, my dudes, just be calm. A lot of times, veterans will get a rest day on Wednesday, especially if they're already dealing with an ailment that they carried into the week. The biggest and most important practice day, obviously, is going to be Friday. If Joe Mixon is not practicing by Friday, that's a concern. If Joe Mixon doesn't play, I think Giovanni Bernard slides in as a really nice RB2 start. So hopefully you have both of them. You have a quick pivot. If you don't, you're going to need to make sure you have another option at hand. Now, if Mixon starts practicing tomorrow or Friday and looks like he's going to start, he remains a good start this week. Browns' run defense has been okay, but we saw Mixon has been able to perform past couple weeks, even against tough run defenses. So I'm not really worried at this point. He's just going to get stronger as the season goes on. Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, both of these guys have clearly been the favorite targets of Joe Burrow for the majority of the season, and looking forward to them having another good game here. AJ Green did have a good week last week, but I'm not rushing back to that. We dropped him previously, and at this point, happy for anyone that kept him and got that one good week last week. But at this point, I still feel like T. Higgins has seen an increase in his air yards, increase in his snap share, and is definitely the wide receiver 2 there. So not going to be playing the wide receiver 3 on a Bengals team. Drew Sample, I can't get myself to do it. He's been way too up and down. Yes, the tight ends had a really good showing against the Browns in week 2, but this isn't week 2 anymore, so I'm probably going to avoid Drew Sample in this one. Not going to play the Bengals defense. I think the Browns play much tighter football in this one, and the Bengals defense would be a bit of a risky play going against the Browns, even at home. I have the Browns winning this one by 3. 24-21 is my prediction. I think it will be a pretty close game. Should be a pretty fun one to watch. Oh, Mims or Sterling Shepard? Well, if you need a start right away, like if you're hurting and you need flex help, or you've got bye weeks coming up, I'd probably rather have Sterling Shepard. Because at this point, we're just hoping that Mims is valuable by week 10. I'd be hard pressed to imagine that we'll be starting Denzel Mims before week 9 or 10. Especially, coming off of dealing with both of his hamstrings. He injured both of his hamstrings over the course of the offseason, so it's probably going to take him a few weeks to get acclimated. Whereas Sterling Shepard, I think once they activate him, he's ready to go. So that would be my inclination there. But if you have room for both, I would like to store both if you can. All right, Chuck Rules 3490 says, I have Julio Jones, DJ Chark, Chase Claypool, John Brown, and Deontay Johnson. Which 3 do I start? So the first one that's easy for me to knock off is John Brown. We've seen him be hobbled for the past couple weeks. I don't know that he's going to be able to fully recover by this week. He is playing the Jets, but if he's still continues to remain hobbled, he has not been nearly as effective dealing with that injury, that knee injury, and I'm hoping that they just let him sit out this week. So then it comes down to Julio Jones, DJ Chark, Chase Claypool, and Deontay Johnson for me. Julio Jones is a lock. You have to start Julio Jones. And then it comes down to Chark, Claypool, and Johnson. I would probably go with both of the Steelers playing against the Titans this week. That, to me, we'll get to that game here in just a little bit, but that is going to be one of the higher scoring games on the week. I'm really excited for that one. The Titans defense has been really poor against slowing down opposing receivers, whereas DJ Chark has been dealing with a bit of an injury himself, playing against the Chargers, a tougher defense. I'll have to check my rankings, but I think I have them right now. I'd have Julio Jones in like the top 5, and then I think both Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson will come in as top 24 plays this week. So those would be the 3 that I would go with. All right, we have the other 2 teams in the NFC East. We got obviously the Eagles and Eagles and Giants playing on Thursday night, but we have the Cowboys and the Washington football team playing on Sunday in this battle for the division lead. Ooh, gosh, the NFC East has been an absolute joke up to this point, but we'll see if Andy Dalton can rebound from that horrible showing on Monday night, trying to get the Cowboys back onto the right track. Whereas the Washington football team, I don't know what they're doing. Kyle Allen has never been someone that has shown to be consistent enough to really, have me have faith in them. So in terms of how this game is coming out, Vegas has no idea what to do with the line. They've got the Cowboys -1, 47.5 over-under, so they're not expecting as much of an explosive offensive performance from the Cowboys as we've seen in the past. I think that might end up being a mistake. Cowboys defense has been just absolutely terrible, but Washington football team's offense hasn't been that great either. Whereas their defense has been really stout against running backs and receivers, but they haven't faced anyone like the Cowboys yet. So I'm kind of throwing a lot of that out. We know the Cowboys are going to give up a lot of points. We'll see if they continue to commit the same amount of turnovers that they have. They've been the worst team by far in terms of their point differential given up from turnovers. Zeke throwing the ball to the ground 2 times on Monday night. Andy Dalton having a couple of bad picks in that one. One of those wasn't his fault. There was a pass interference on CeeDee Lamb that should have been called, but the other one was really bad, and he had another interception that was just dropped. So we'll see. Andy Dalton historically has been bad on Monday night, so I'm hoping that it was just a case of the jitters. Plays an easier team here with Washington. Hopefully he can turn things around. In terms of who we're starting, though, I'm not going to be throwing Andy Dalton back out there. He's not a streaming option for me, at least, until we see what he can do against some of these easier matchups. If he's able to turn things around and start having some good games, then we can talk about it. But for now, we're still going to start Zeke. I don't think Zeke is going to be fumbling the ball 2 times again. Obviously, Amari Cooper came through for you in the end that last week. It was getting a little dicey there up until the end, but came through with a pretty solid performance. At this point, Cooper has only had 1 bad performance all year, and I think they're going to continue to need to feed this passing game if they want to stay in games. So Cooper and Lamb, both good starts, and then Dalton Schultz. The Washington football team has been exploitable against tight ends, so I like him here. Now, Michael Gallup definitely has been very boom-bust. He's still getting a lot of red zone targets. He's getting a lot of targets now that Andy Dalton is the quarterback, so he's not a must-bench by any means. But based on his volatility here, if you're nervous about the way that this game is going to go, I definitely could see you talking yourself into playing a lot of people over Michael Gallup. So he's kind of on my iffy list this week. Tony Pollard definitely should be rostered. We saw him look well in the absence of Zeke for a couple drives there when they'd taken him out for the fumbles that he committed. But until Zeke misses any time, Pollard is still going to just remain a handcuff. And then Cedric Wilson looks like his role is pretty much fizzled out without Dak Prescott there, so we're not throwing him back in the lineup. On the Washington side, we're going to play guys that we know are heavily involved in this offense. We can play both of the running backs here. J.D. McKissic has been the less explosive and less exciting option, but he's been putting up about 14 fantasy points going up against this rough Cowboys defense. I really think he could have a good game. And then Antonio Gibson still has the explosive upside to be able to break any play to the house. So like both of the running backs here, Terry McLaurin is about to go off this week. Definitely a DFS play, someone that should be heavily played in DFS because of his potential ceiling here versus one of the worst pass defenses in the league. And then I think, as we mentioned, Washington's defense should be a good play here, considering how many turnovers the Cowboys have been committing. Watch the Cowboys play a better game this week because, of course, but I think Washington's defense is a good stream this week. Logan Thomas is someone you could probably talk me into, but I'm not. I want to see it for a couple weeks. He's had a good week 1 and then was just absolutely terrible until last week. He scored a second touchdown, but he still has yet to have like more than 50 yards passing in a single game. So he's pretty much touchdown or bust. So I'm probably not going to be trusting that, at least until we see it consistently with Kyle Allen. Speaking of, we're not playing Kyle Allen or Dontrell Inman in this one. I've got the Cowboys winning 27-24. We'll see if they can pull it together. I still have faith in Andy Dalton to turn things around here. I think Monday night was hopefully a little bit of an anomaly. I still think the Cowboys have too much talent to continue losing the way that they are. We'll see if they can get it done this week. I got them winning by 3. Starting Big Ben or Ryan Tannehill. I'm not going to ever tell anyone to bench Ryan Tannehill anymore. I think I had Big Ben ranked higher in my rankings. So I guess just based on that, I'd be starting Big Ben. But Ryan Tannehill has been an absolute beast ever since he's had A.J. Brown healthy. He's actually been outperforming Patrick Mahomes in passer rating and yards. It's been complete nuts what Ryan Tannehill has been able to do, and he's just continued to do it. So it's a tough matchup for him going against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I do think that'll be a high-scoring game. Both are great starts. If I had to pick one, I would probably go Ben Roethlisberger, but it's really hard for me to recommend benching Tannehill at this point. So just trade Roethlisberger away so you don't have to worry about it. Okay, let's talk about the Green Bay Packers and the Houston Texans. Probably going to be the highest scoring game of the week. Obviously, Vegas thinks so. We've got a 57-point over-under, hoping for Aaron Rodgers to have a rebound game after a very forgettable game in which he threw only his 3rd pick 6 of his career. Follow that up with another interception that was more Devontae Adams' fault than his. And then he just looked rattled and scared for the rest of the game. So hopefully he can turn things back around here. Got the Packers slated to win this one on the road by 3.5. But the Packers defense, where they've been exploitable for the most part, has been in the run game. Whereas the Texans have been exploitable pretty much everywhere. So we're very excited to see what the Packers can do here. I think this should be a shootout. Definitely Deshaun Watson is able to overcome the Packers defense on all fronts. We know Jair Alexander has actually been very good at slowing down the opposing wide receiver 1, so that might give us a little pause in starting Will Fuller in DFS, but I think he has been so consistent up to this point, with the exception of the game where he goosed you because of the hamstring injury. He's been one of the most consistent receivers in the league, scoring over 15 fantasy points in every other game. So you're not going to be too scared about this here. I do think that there will be enough points being scored that pretty much all the options here are going to be good. So on the Packers side, it's pretty easy. We're starting Rodgers. We're starting Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is going to fight with Alvin Kamara to see who will be the number 1 running back on the week. Devontae Adams, we saw last year, same thing, coming back off of an injury. The first week back was a little bit of a depressed stat line. If you have the opportunity to go buy him, this is probably your last week, because Devontae Adams is about to go off on the Texans, and I do think Robert Tonyan will have a better game here. You could probably talk me into playing Jamal Williams too if you're in a desperate enough spot. Should probably be involved in the pass game some here. Not excited about any of the other options here on Green Bay, so let's jump over to the Texans side. Deshaun Watson, ever since firing Bill O'Brien, has basically come back alive and looked like his old self. Been a dominant fantasy force over the past couple weeks, and I think he can definitely do it again here against the Packers. David Johnson, as we mentioned, the Packers are giving up the most fantasy points to opposing running backs in the entire NFL. So by nature, David Johnson is going to be a good start here. He's been pretty consistent, high-end RB2 for most of the year. Should be a good RB1 week for him. Will Fuller, as we mentioned, if he does get shadowed by Jair Alexander, that is a little bit of a disappointment, but I think he can overcome it and still have a good game. Brandon Cooks came back to life after we had pretty much written him off and has remained a good start. I think he will be a good start here. And obviously, we have the whole Randall Cobb revenge game narrative. I don't really know that that's going to matter here because I don't think he and the Packers ever departed on bad terms, but we'll see. I think you could definitely convince me to start Randall Cobb. He's been pretty consistent up to this point too. I'm just trying to keep my starts, guys that I had projected at wide receiver 36 or higher. He's just outside that for me, but depending on your league format, you may need to start him anyway. Darren Fells, as long as Jordan Akins is out, Darren Fells will continue to be a really solid tight end start. He's been dominant the past couple weeks. Jordan Akins dealing with a high ankle sprain. Look for him to maybe miss another week or two. Darren Fells, a really good streaming option for you. Overall, I do think the Packers definitely bounce back in this one. I have them winning this game closely, 34-31. Starting to notice a trend here. I got a lot of games finishing by 3, which means there should be a lot of good football to be played. If these games are as close as we're expecting, that's really good for fantasy. After a down week last week, should be a much better week for fantasy points being scored here in week 7. Okay, so we have a question here from Brad. Starting 3 between Godwin, Boyd, Fulgham, Higgins, Lamb, and Woods. Jeez. You have a very strong wide receiver core there. So what I'm going to recommend first and foremost is if you have a weak spot on your team, whether that's running back or tight end, I would recommend trying to package 2 of these guys and try to upgrade. See if you can get a Jonathan Taylor. See if you can buy Christian McCaffrey coming, before he comes back, and see if you can upgrade your running back spot, because having to constantly choose between 6 receivers every week is a very frustrating affair, unless the rest of your team is just dominant too, and you're just killing it in this league. My assumption is your receivers are that strong, you probably have a hole somewhere else on your team. That being said, assuming you're in a league where just nobody trades, or you're just to answer your question, off the top of my head, I'm locking in Godwin and Boyd, and I'm probably still going to go Lamb over Fulgham and Higgins, maybe Woods, but he does play the Bears, so I had to check my rankings, and you can check them as well. Access those for free on fantasyaddictionnetwork.com. But just based off of what I'm remembering, what I did earlier, I'm pretty sure I have Godwin, Boyd, and Lamb ahead of Higgins, Fulgham, and Woods. But all of those guys are honestly good starts this week, so do with that as you will. Okay, let's jump over and talk about another potentially high-scoring game on this week. We have 2 teams that are notorious for choking it in the end, so we'll see what ends up happening when we put both of them into the same game together. Got the Detroit Lions and the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta Falcons coming off their first win of the season, whereas the Detroit Lions won their second game this last week. Both of these teams trying to find some semblance of a way of getting back into it this season. Guess it's not completely out for either of them, but definitely looking grim for their season-long prospects. And whoever loses this game is, probably out. But should be a pretty fun game. The Falcons have been absolutely abysmal in terms of slowing down anything on defense. They've given up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks, the second most to tight ends, the 5th most to wide receivers, and the 10th most to running backs, whereas the Lions have really only been good at slowing down tight ends, and that's also mostly just been by nature of who they played. They haven't really played any good tight ends up to this point. So both of these teams, really bad defense, 55-point over-under. This is going to be a game that you're going to attack heavily in tournaments in DFS this week. Falcons are actually favored to win this one by 2.5. I definitely can see why coming in at home. Both of these teams, I think, have a pretty good shot at pulling this one in. This feels like a toss-up for me. I imagine this spread will get closer to 0 as the week goes on, because neither of these teams really strike me as a team that, like, oh my gosh, that they're going to blow each other out. So it should be a pretty close game regardless. Matthew Stafford, I think, is a good start this week. I know he was a good start last week, and then we got the 3 rushing touchdowns between DeAndre Swift getting 2 and Adrian Peterson getting 1. Every single time those guys ran the ball into the end zone, it was just stabbing me in the heart a little bit more, because I was very heavily exposed to Matthew Stafford last week in DFS and even in one of my leagues. So that was a bit depressing, but I think this will be a better game for him. As we mentioned, the Falcons are giving up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks by far. Like, it's not even close. So Stafford should be a good start this week. Now, DeAndre Swift, coming off of that massive performance, Still isn't quite getting the snap and the touch share that we would like to see a second round pick get, but hopefully that performance that he put up last week will at least get him in the good graces of Matt Patricia and realize that he's probably his best chance at saving his job right now. So I think DeAndre Swift is going to be a good RB2 play this week. Kenny Golladay is a locked and loaded starter every week, and then TJ Hawkinson should have a pretty massive day against the Falcons' putrid defense. Adrian Peterson, you could talk me into based on your situation. He's pretty much a touchdown dependent back at this point, especially with DeAndre Swift stealing the majority of the passing work there. Marvin Jones has been absolutely dust up to this point. Last week, we were hoping he would go off against the Jaguars and gave you 2 catches. So very poor performance by Marvin Jones. We'll see what he can do this week. I have him ranked I think he's 51 right now. So probably not someone I'm looking to start, but if he was going to go off, this would be the week. So if you're ballsy and you really want to play darts with this and just give him one last shot, if he doesn't do it this week, he cannot be rostered for the remainder of the season in my mind. But if he's going to get it done, this is going to be the week. And if he doesn't, Danny Amendola is probably going to have a good game. On the Falcons side, we've seen historically Matt Ryan does not know how to operate sans Julio Jones. Well, Julio Jones is back. Yes, he didn't practice today, but it's Wednesday, veteran rest day. Monitor the practice situation, but he ended up going off of the injury designation heading into last Sunday, so I don't imagine that he's going to be back on it this week. So Julio Jones should be fine. Him and Calvin Ridley are honestly top 10, if not top 5 plays this week at the wide receiver position. Todd Gurley had a down week last week, but I think against the Lions should have a better day. Now, the other pieces here, as we mentioned, Hayden Hurst going against the Lions, the one place that they've been able to slow opposing teams down has been the tight end. Hayden Hurst did get that fluky touchdown last week, but he really has kind of looked lost for this team at this point, so I'm only starting him if I have to. And then Russell Gage had a better week last week, but I don't know. It's just rough for me to start a wide receiver 3 unless you're in a deeper league. I could definitely see him having a decent day, but obviously a pretty clear gap between Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley all the way down to Russell Gage. And then Brian Hill pretty much just remains a handcuff as long as Gurley is getting the touches that he's been getting. Overall, I like the Falcons to win this one. I got them winning 34-31. Yes, another 3-point deficit here, but I expect this one to hit the over by far. Should be a very fun day for fantasy and should get you a lot of points. I'm assuming your question following the waves is start Josh Allen, not Kyle Allen. I would start Josh Allen. Playing against the Jets should put up a really good game again. We saw him, go bonanza in week 1. You're safe starting anyone against the Jets at this point. Love Tannehill, but he does play the Steelers, so there is a little risk there. I'd rather be playing Josh Allen than Tannehill this week. Thank you for the subscribe, Brad Kohler. That means a lot to me. I appreciate that. And let's see, Falcons are going to be up by 10, and then the Lions are going to come back, and then they're going to choke and tie. That's honestly probably would be the most Lions-Falcons thing as possible, for the Falcons to choke a lead, and then the Lions to get back into it, and them find a way to choke it. But because both of these teams, neither of them can have a fitting and just ending, it has to end in a tie. That would be perfect. So I would definitely pay money to see that. Okay, let's talk about the last game on the early game slate. It is the last 1 p.m. Eastern game. I keep saying things in Mountain Time because that's where I'm from, but the last 1 p.m. Eastern Time game here on the slate, arguably the most exciting game on the slate this week. The Steelers versus the Titans. We've got the 5-0 Steelers versus the 5-0 Titans. Both these teams have looked unbeatable up to this point, but something's got to give this week. Titans playing this game at home. Steelers have been on a massive tear. Ben Roethlisberger has looked dominant. Their defense has been great. Titans defense has been a low suspect, but their offense has been nuclear. Going to be a fun game. Got a 50.5 over-under, a little bit lower than I was expecting it to be. I think the Steelers defense has helped keeping that down a little bit. Titans are actually favored. I was surprised by that because Vegas has been disrespecting the Titans up to this point. Seeing them be favorited over the Steelers was a little bit of a surprise to me, but I'll take it. Look for that line to change as the week goes on. Steelers defense has been lights out against quarterbacks and running backs. Best defense against running backs up to this point, but it doesn't matter. You're starting Derrick Henry regardless of matchup. Quarterbacks, tight ends, have been pretty good there. Funnily enough, the place that they've been weak has been against receivers. They've just been kind of like a bend but don't break kind of defense, giving up a lot of yards but not giving up a lot of touchdowns. Whereas the Titans, as we mentioned, have been below average across the board on defense. I think this will be a higher scoring game because the Titans' offense has just been so good up to this point. It's really hard to imagine the Steelers coming out and winning this one. And the Steelers find a way to choke these kind of games too, historically. So we'll see who ends up out on top. But from a fantasy perspective, lots of good options here. Love Ben Roethlisberger this week. Titans just gave up a massive game to Deshaun Watson. Should be another fun game here. James Conner definitely remains a good play here. Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson. I love both of those guys this week. Deontay Johnson, full participant in practice today, so it looks like he is pretty solid in coming back this week. Really excited to get him back into the fold because, we haven't seen him for a while, but the last time we saw him perform was actually the leading receiver in terms of targets on this team. So it should be a good thing to see him come back into the lineup. And then obviously Chase Claypool has been dominant up to this point. We'll see what he can do. Eric Ebron, at this point, you probably need to start him just based on the tight end landscape. I think he'll be an okay start this week. Now, Juju Smith-Schuster is obviously the biggest question mark here. He has been on the field. He's been running a lot of routes. He's been getting a lot of snaps. He has not been getting any production, and it's been depressing because he's a really good player. He's a 1,400-yard receiver. He's still incredibly young. I don't know whether this is the Steelers just proving that they don't need him, so that way they don't feel like I don't get it. Like, has he done something to aggravate Mike Tomlin? Is he not as good as we thought he was? I just don't know. At this point, though, it's very difficult to trust Juju and Watts. As soon as you bench him, he's probably going to go off for like a 35-point game, but that's just how the cookie crumbles. I'm keeping him on my bench if I have him in seasonal leagues until we see otherwise, unless you're just stuck and you don't have any other better options. James Washington, I think, gets relegated back to the wide receiver 4 now that Deontay Johnson is there and Chase Claypool is coming into the fray. So both of those guys are just fringe starts for me, not someone I'm looking to play. And know the Steelers' defense has been dominant for fantasy, but I'm not playing any defenses against Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry at this point. Speaking of the devil, I'm still starting Tannehill this week against the Steelers' defense because he's just been that good. He's been ridiculous for fantasy, ridiculous for real football. And at this point, the Titans have to be one of the teams you have to consider as Super Bowl favorites. Derrick Henry went absolutely bananas last week. We see him kind of do this every year where he starts the season a little bit slow, and as it ramps up, he just starts getting stronger and stronger. This will be a really tough matchup for him going against the best run defense in the league. We'll see who ends up winning that battle, but I'm always going to put my money down on Derrick Henry, so we'll see what he can end up doing this week. Don't expect a 40-point game that he gave you last week, but definitely could still have a good game here. A.J. Brown has been everything that we've needed him to be, coming back and helping Ryan Tannehill have his dominant option there. Get Corey Davis back this week as well, but considering the matchup, probably not going to force him into the lineup, especially with Humphreys there. Now, the real question mark here comes with this little star I've got next to Jonnu Smith and Anthony Firkser. So Anthony Firkser obviously got the touchdown last week as Jonnu Smith was in the game, but he left early, and then Firkser ended up having, I believe it was 8 catches on 9 targets. So if Jonnu Smith is out or limited, I think Firkser is the better play here. But if Jonnu Smith is able to log a full practice participation by Friday, I think you're going to go back to the well with Jonnu, and then Firkser will probably just be a one-off. Got to monitor that injury report here. Whoever ends up being the starter, whoever looks healthier, is going to be someone I'm going to be throwing into my lineup because the Titans have been targeting their tight ends a lot up to this point. Pruitt is still out on the COVID IR. So one of these guys is probably going to have a good game. Hopefully we have some clarity by Sunday as to whether or not Jonnu Smith is healthy. I'm not playing either defense in this one, but should be a really fun game. I'm going to call my shot here and still say the Titans are going to remain undefeated. I got them winning 29-24. As I mentioned, the Steelers do find a way to lose these games historically. They've been a different team up to this point, so maybe that's not going to hold true this time, but I got the Titans going 6-0 this week. And that'll do it for our early game predictions, starts and sits. We'll be back tomorrow with all of our late games, the Sunday night game, the Monday night game, going through the remaining 6 games, I believe, are the ones we haven't gotten through yet, giving you guys advice on start sits. I'll get to your questions here in just a second, but just wanted to preface that and say we go through Wednesday night, talk about the early games. Thursday night, we talk about the late games every single week. And any questions you guys have, we do post up the individual videos, so feel free to ask on there as well. Don't have to watch the whole stream. If you missed any part of this, just be on the lookout. We'll be posting up these individual videos tomorrow. Okay, let's see what we got here in terms of questions. Let me just pull up my rankings here. That's probably going to end up being the easier question here. So what do we got? Boston Scott or Antonio Gibson? So right now I have Boston Scott at RB21. I've got Antonio Gibson at RB18 in PPR. So I'm probably going to be going with Antonio Gibson here. Big Ben or Stafford this week? Let's see. Pretty sure I have Stafford above Big Ben. Yep, I got Stafford at QB8 and Big Ben at QB12. I like both, but I think based on the matchup there, the matchup against the Falcons is too juicy to ignore. So I'm going to go with Matt Stafford over Big Ben this week. What's up, Alyssa? How you doing? Michael Thomas, new injury? I know. I don't know if it's new. It's probably something that they just haven't reported on because they haven't had to. But I think he's still a good start this week. Let's see. Should I trade Michael Thomas and Damian Harris for Aaron Jones? Yeah. I mean, Aaron Jones is about to go off against the Texans this week, and he's already passed his bye week. He's not dealing with an injury. Michael Thomas could take a few more weeks before he's back to his prime. And if you have, good enough wide receivers to start, I'm always going to recommend going after RB over a wide receiver just based on the landscape right now. If you can get Aaron Jones from Michael Thomas, I do that in a heartbeat. And you have Devontae Adams. I mean, yeah, I think the Packers, this is a good week to buy low on them after a poor performance against the Buccaneers. So yeah, I would recommend doing that for sure. I think your wide receivers are strong enough between Adams, Woods, and Parker. Hopefully Parker is back next week, healthy. Cooks obviously coming back alive here. So yeah, I totally be down for that. But yeah, hopefully you guys. Oh, we got another question here. Keelan Cole or Swift in the flex? Let's go with Swift. You're not going to put that genie back in the bottle. I'm not sure he's going to come anywhere near what he did last week, but with DJ Chark hopefully a little healthier this week, I don't know that Keelan Cole is going to have as much of a role playing against the tougher Chargers defense. Let's go with DeAndre Swift against the Atlanta Falcons. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Again, as I said, we'll be live streaming again tomorrow going over the rest of the games, but if you have any questions, hit us up either on this video or on the individual ones we post tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching. I do truly appreciate it. It makes me feel honored and humbled to know that you guys join me in this journey. Hope you guys are enjoying this season, and good luck to you in week 7. We'll see you guys in the next video.